Okay, so I need to tell you something about Libras that honestly most people completely miss. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I keep noticing this pattern. Libras just seem to get what they want. Not in an aggressive way. Not by pushing or forcing. But through this almost magnetic quality that I think operates on a completely different frequency than most of us understand. Here's what I mean. You probably know a Libra in your life. Maybe you are one. And if you pay attention, you'll notice something really interesting. Doors open for them. Opportunities appear. People want to help them. Things just work out in ways that seem almost too convenient to be coincidence. And I don't think this is luck. I really believe there's something deeper happening here. Something we can all learn from and actually apply in our own lives. Now, if you've ever felt frustrated watching a Libra effortlessly attract what you've been struggling to manifest, or if you've wondered why they seem to have this unfair advantage when it comes to relationships, money, or opportunities, stay with me on this one. Because what I'm about to share isn't just about understanding Libras better. I think this is about understanding how manifestation actually works at the energetic level. And once you see what Libras are doing, even unconsciously, you can start doing it too. The thing is strange. Most people think Libras get what they want because they're charming or diplomatic or good at playing social games. And sure, those things help. But that's not the real secret. The real secret runs so much deeper than personality traits. It's wired into their cosmic blueprint in a way that I believe gives them access to one of the most powerful manifestation frequencies in the entire zodiac. And here's what really gets my attention. This isn't just theoretical astrology stuff. I've been watching this play out in real time with the Libras in my life and honestly in my own experience when I've experimented with these principles. The results are undeniable. When you understand what Libras are tapping into and you start working with that same energy, things shift fast. So let me break down exactly what's happening here. Because I think once you see the three core mechanisms behind Libra's magnetic power, you're going to have one of those moments where everything suddenly makes sense. You're going to look back at situations in your life and think, oh, that's why that happened. Or that's what I was doing wrong. And more importantly, you're going to have a roadmap for how to align yourself with the same frequency that makes Libras so naturally magnetic. The first thing you need to understand is this. Libra is ruled by Venus. And I know that might sound basic if you know anything about astrology. But I don't think most people really grasp what that means on a practical energetic level. Venus isn't just the planet of love and beauty in some abstract poetic sense. Venus is the cosmic principle of attraction itself. It's the force that draws things together, that creates magnetic pull, that makes one thing irresistible to another. Think about it like this. In physics, there are forces that push and forces that pull. Mars energy pushes. It's aggressive. It goes after what it wants. It conquers. But Venus energy pulls. It doesn't chase. It attracts. It doesn't force. It magnetizes. And Libras, because they're ruled by Venus, are hardwired to operate through this pulling mechanism rather than the pushing one that most of us default to. And here's where it gets really interesting. Most people, when they want something, they go into Mars mode. They strategize. They hustle. They make plans. They take action. And there's nothing wrong with that. Mars energy absolutely has its place. But what I've noticed is that when you're only operating from Mars energy, from that pushing, forcing energy, you often end up exhausted. You're working really hard, but the results don't match the effort. You feel like you're swimming upstream. Libras don't do that. They can't do that actually. It's not in their nature. Instead, they do something that looks almost passive from the outside, but is actually incredibly powerful. They align themselves with what they want and then they let it come to them. They become a vibrational match for their desire, and then the universe does the heavy lifting. Now I know that might sound like manifestation cliché talk. But stay with me because I'm going to show you exactly how this works mechanically. It's not just about thinking positive thoughts or visualizing. It's about understanding that everything in the universe operates on frequency. And when your frequency matches the frequency of what you want, Attraction happens automatically. It's not magic. It's physics. Libras understand this instinctively. They might not be able to articulate it. They might not even be consciously aware they're doing it. But their entire energetic system is designed to work this way. And the key is in how they relate to desire itself. Most people, when they want something, they come from a place of lack. They focus on not having it. They feel the absence of it. And that lack frequency is what they're broadcasting out into the universe. But Libras, because of their Venus rulership, they relate to desire differently. They don't focus on what's missing. They focus on the quality of what they want. They attune to the feeling of having it. They imagine how it would feel to already possess it. And this is crucial because the universe doesn't respond to your words or even your thoughts. It responds to your frequency, to the energetic signal you're sending out. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out. Say a Libra wants a new relationship. They don't sit around obsessing about being single or feeling desperate about finding someone. Instead, they start living as if they're already in the energy of that relationship. They might buy nice sheets for their bed, not because someone's coming over, but because they're creating the environment that matches the frequency of partnership. They might start going to places they'd want to take a partner, not to hunt for someone, but to embody the lifestyle that includes that relationship. Do you see the difference? They're not chasing the thing, they're becoming the energetic match for the thing. And then the thing shows up because it has to. The universe has no choice but to reflect back to them what they're broadcasting. And this is where most people get tripped up. They think manifestation is about wanting something really badly and then doing a bunch of stuff to try to make it happen. But that's actually the opposite of how it works. The wanting, the trying, right? The efforting. All of that is coming from lack. And lack attracts more lack. What Libras do, whether they realize it or not, is they skip right past the lack and go straight to embodiment. Now here's something I find really fascinating about this. Libras are often criticized for being indecisive. People say they can't make up their minds. They waffle back and forth. They take forever to choose. And on the surface that looks like a weakness. But I actually think it's one of their greatest manifestation tools. And here's why. When you're indecisive, when you're holding multiple possibilities at once without collapsing into one choice too quickly, you're actually keeping yourself in a state of quantum potential. You're not limiting the universe's options for how to deliver what you want. You're staying open to multiple pathways, multiple timelines, multiple ways things could unfold. Most people make a decision to fast. They decide exactly how something has to happen, exactly what it has to look like, exactly who has to be involved, and then they get attached to that one specific outcome. And when the universe tries to deliver something even better through a different route, they miss it because they're so fixated on their one narrow vision. But Libras, because they naturally hold space for multiple possibilities, they don't close doors prematurely. They stay in that expanded state where the universe has room to work. And often what shows up for them is better than what they originally thought they wanted because they didn't limit the delivery mechanism. I've seen this play out so many times. A Libra will be considering multiple job offers or multiple romantic interests or multiple living situations. And everyone around them is like, just pick one already. But they're not being flaky. They're actually doing something really sophisticated energetically. They're allowing the universe to show them which option carries the highest frequency, which path has the most alignment, which choice will lead to the most expansion. And then when they finally do choose, it's not from a place of logic or pros and cons lists. It's from a place of resonance. They feel which option is correct. And because they waited for that feeling instead of forcing a premature decision, they almost always end up choosing the thing that works out best. This is something I think we can all learn from. Instead of rushing to decide, instead of forcing clarity before it's ready to emerge, what if we gave ourselves permission to stay in the question a little longer? What if we trusted that the right choice would become obvious when the timing was right? What if we stopped seeing indecision as a weakness and started seeing it as a sophisticated form of energetic discernment? Because here's what I really believe. The universe is always trying to guide us toward our highest good. But we have to be receptive enough to hear the guidance. And if we're too busy forcing and pushing and deciding from our limited human perspective, we miss the whispers. We miss the signs. We miss the synchronicities that are trying to point us in the right direction. Libras don't miss those signs. They're paying attention. They're receptive. They're in a state of allowing rather than forcing. And that receptivity is what makes them such powerful manifesto RS. Now the second major mechanism behind Libra's magnetic power is something I call the mirror effect. And this is where things get really interesting, because I think this is the piece that most people completely overlook when they're trying to understand why Libras are so successful at attracting what they want. Libra is the sign of relationships, of partnership, of the other. And what that means energetically is that Libras are hardwired to see themselves reflected in the people and situations around them. They're constantly reading the room, picking up on subtle cues, adjusting their energy to create harmony and balance. And while this can sometimes be criticized as being too concerned with what others think, I actually believe it's one of their greatest superpowers. Here's why. The universe is a mirror. Everything you experience externally is a reflection of your internal state. And Libras understand this at a cellular level. They know that if they want to attract something, they need to become the thing they want to attract. They need to embody the qualities, the energy, the frequency of what they're calling in. So when a Libra wants to attract abundance, they don't just visualize having money. They start acting abundant. They treat themselves well. They invest in quality. They tip generously. They create beauty in their environment. They're not faking it or pretending. They're genuinely shifting their internal state to match the frequency of abundance. And then the external world has no choice but to mirror that back to them. This is different from what most people do. Most people try to change their external circumstances first. They think, if I just get the money, then I'll feel abundant. If I just meet the right person, then I'll feel loved. If I just get the job, then I'll feel successful. But that's backwards. The internal state has to shift first. The frequency has to change first. And then the external reality reorganizes itself to match. Libras get this instinctively. They don't wait for external validation to feel a certain way. They generate the feeling first and then watch as the universe delivers the matching circumstances. And this is why they seem to effortlessly attract what they want. They're not actually effortless. They're doing deep internal work. But because that work is invisible, because it's happening at the frequency level rather than the action level, it looks like magic from the outside. And I want to give you a really specific example of how this mirror effect works in practice, because I think this is where it becomes super tangible. I know a Libra who wanted to attract a romantic partner, but instead of going on dating apps or asking friends to set her up or doing any of the typical external actions, she did something completely different. She started treating herself the way she wanted a partner to treat her. She would take herself on dates to nice restaurants. She would buy herself flowers every week. She would write herself love notes and leave them around her apartment. She created this entire internal experience of being cherished and adored. And here's what happened. Within 3 months she met someone who treated her exactly the way she had been treating herself. The universe literally mirrored back to her the frequency she had been broadcasting. Now you might be thinking, okay, but that's just one person. That could be coincidence. But I've seen this pattern repeat over and over with Libras. They don't wait for external circumstances to make them feel a certain way. They generate the feeling internally first. And then the external world has no choice but to match it. And this brings me to something really important about how Libras handle rejection or disappointment. Because obviously they don't get everything they want all the time. Nobody does. But what I've noticed is that when something doesn't work out for a Libra, they don't spiral into lack mentality. They don't start questioning their worth or their ability to manifest. Instead, they immediately recalibrate. They look at what happened and they ask themselves, what frequency was I actually broadcasting? What was I really aligned with? And often they realize that underneath their conscious desire was some kind of misalignment. Maybe they wanted the relationship but they were actually afraid of intimacy. Maybe they wanted the job but they were actually afraid of success. Maybe they wanted the money but they were actually afraid of responsibility. And this is where Libras have a huge advantage. Because they're so attuned to balance and harmony. They can spot internal contradictions really quickly. They can feel when their conscious desire and their subconscious programming are out of alignment. And instead of pushing through that misalignment, instead of trying to force something to work despite the internal conflict, they pause. They do the inner work to resolve the contradiction. And then they try again from a place of true alignment. This is something I think is absolutely crucial for anyone who wants to manifest more effectively. You have to be willing to look at your internal contradictions. You have to be willing to admit when you're saying you want something but your energy is actually pushing it away. And you have to be willing to do the work to resolve that conflict before you can expect the external world to deliver what you're asking for. Most people skip this step. They just keep pushing and forcing and wondering why nothing's working. But Libras don't skip it. They can't skip it because their entire system is designed to seek balance and harmony. And if there's internal discord, if there's misalignment between what they're saying they want and what they're actually energetically available for, they feel it immediately. It's uncomfortable for them, and so they're motivated to resolve it. Now the third major mechanism behind Libra's manifestation power is what I call strategic receptivity. And this is probably the most misunderstood aspect of how Libras operate, because from the outside it can look like they're being passive or indecisive or even manipulative. But I think what's actually happening is much more sophisticated than that. Libras understand something that most people don't, which is that there's a time to act and a time to receive. There's a time to push and a time to pull. There's a time to make things happen and a time to let things happen. And they're really good at knowing which mode to be in at any given moment. Most people are either all action all the time or all receptivity all the time. The action people are constantly hustling and grinding and making things happen through sheer force of will, and they get results but they also get exhausted. The receptivity people are constantly waiting and hoping and visualizing but never actually taking any concrete steps, and they stay stuck in potential without ever actualizing anything. But Libras move fluidly between these two modes. They know when to step forward and when to step back. They know when to initiate and when to respond. They know when to be the pursuer and when to be the pursued. And this flexibility, this ability to read the energy of a situation and adjust accordingly, this is what makes them so effective at getting what they want. Let me give you an example of how this plays out in a professional context. Say a Libra wants a promotion at work. They're not going to march into their boss's office and demand it. That's Mars energy. That's pushing. But they're also not going to just sit around hoping someone notices their good work. That's passive receptivity without any action component. Instead, they're going to do something much more strategic. They're going to start embodying the energy of the position they want. They're going to dress the part. They're going to speak with the authority of someone at that level. They're going to take on projects that showcase their readiness for more responsibility. But they're going to do all of this without attachment to the outcome. They're not going to be desperate or pushy about it. They're going to be confident and relaxed, as if the promotion is already theirs. They're just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. And then here's the key part. They're going to pay attention to the response they're getting. If their boss seems receptive, if doors are opening, if opportunities are appearing, they're going to lean into that. They're going to take the next step. But if they're hitting resistance, if the energy feels blocked, they're not going to force it. They're going to pull back and reassess. Maybe the timing isn't right. Maybe there's something else they need to learn first. Maybe there's a better opportunity waiting for them somewhere else. This is what I mean by strategic receptivity. It's not passive. It's highly active. But it's action that's informed by constant energetic feedback. It's action that's responsive rather than reactive. It's action that flows with the current rather than swimming against it. And I think this is one of the most important lessons we can learn from Libras. Because so many of us have been taught that success requires constant effort, constant pushing, constant forcing. We've been taught that if something isn't working, we just need to try harder. But that's not actually how the universe works. The universe responds to alignment, not effort. It responds to frequency, not force. When you're in alignment, when your frequency matches what you want, things flow, doors open, opportunities appear, the right people show up at the right time, and it doesn't feel hard because you're moving with the current rather than against it. But when you're out of alignment, when your frequency doesn't match what you want, no amount of effort is going to make it work. You're swimming upstream. You're pushing a boulder uphill, and eventually you're going to exhaust yourself. Libras understand this intuitively. They can feel when they're in flow and when they're forcing, and they're willing to adjust their approach based on that feedback. They're not attached to doing things a certain way. They're not invested in proving they can make something work through sheer willpower. They're interested in results, and they're willing to be flexible about how those results show up. Now I want to talk about something that I think is really important when it comes to understanding Libra energy and how we can all tap into it more effectively. And that's the concept of energetic neutrality. Because I think this is one of the most powerful but least understood aspects of how Libras manifest. When most people want something, they get emotionally charged about it. They get excited or anxious or desperate or frustrated. And all of those emotions are actually forms of resistance. They're signals to the universe that you don't already have the thing, that you're separate from it, that there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be. But Libras have this ability to want something without being attached to it. They can hold a desire lightly. They can be interested in an outcome without being desperate for it. And this energetic neutrality is actually what allows things to come to them so easily. Think about it like this. When you're desperate for something, when you need it to happen, when you're emotionally invested in a specific outcome, you're actually creating resistance. You're broadcasting a frequency of lack. You're telling the universe, I don't have this, and I need it, and I'm incomplete without it. And the universe responds to that frequency by giving you more experiences of not having it, of needing it, of being incomplete. But when you can hold a desire with neutrality, when you can want something while simultaneously being okay if it doesn't happen, you're in a completely different energetic state. You're broadcasting a frequency of wholeness. You're telling the universe, I'm complete as I am, and this thing would be a nice addition, but I don't need it to be okay. And paradoxically, that's when the universe delivers it to you. Libras are really good at this. They can want a relationship without being desperate for one. They can want a job without being attached to getting it. They can want money without being anxious about not having it. And this neutrality, this ability to hold desire without desperation, this is what makes them such powerful manifestors. Now I know what you might be thinking. If I'm not emotionally invested in something, if I'm neutral about it, doesn't that mean I don't really want it? Doesn't that mean I'm not putting enough energy behind it? And this is where I think there's a huge misunderstanding about how manifestation works. Emotional charge is not the same as desire. You can deeply want something without being emotionally desperate about it. In fact, I would argue that true desire, the kind that actually manifests, is calm. It's certain. It's grounded. It's not frantic or anxious or needy. It's just a clear knowing of what you want combined with a relaxed confidence that it's on its way. And this is exactly the energy that Libras naturally embody. They know what they want. They're clear about it. But they're not stressed about it. They're not losing sleep over it. They're not obsessing about it. They're just calmly moving in the direction of their desire while staying open to how it might show up. And here's something really interesting that I've noticed. When Libras do get emotionally charged about something, when they do get desperate or anxious or attached, that's usually when things stop working for them. That's when doors start closing instead of opening. That's when opportunities dry up. Because they've moved out of their natural frequency. They've moved out of that calm, receptive, magnetically attractive state and into a state of resistance. So if you want to tap into Libra energy more effectively, if you want to start manifesting the way they do, one of the most important things you can do is practice energetic neutrality. And I'm going to give you a really practical way to do this because I think this is where a lot of manifestation teaching falls short. People tell you to detach from the outcome, but they don't tell you how. Here's what I do and what I've seen work really effectively. When you notice yourself getting emotionally charged about something you want, when you notice yourself getting anxious or desperate or frustrated, pause, take a breath, and then ask yourself this question. If I knew for certain that this thing was already on its way to me, if I had absolute faith that the universe was handling it, how would I feel right now? And then let yourself feel that feeling. Let yourself drop into that state of calm certainty. Let yourself relax into the knowing that it's handled. You don't have to figure out how. You don't have to force it to happen. You just have to trust that it's coming. And here's what happens when you do this consistently. Your frequency shifts. You move out of lack and into abundance. You move out of resistance and into allowing. And the universe responds to that shift by delivering what you want faster and more easily than you could have made it happen through force. This is the secret that Libras know. This is what they're doing whether they realize it or not. They're staying in that frequency of calm certainty. They're trusting that what's meant for them will find them. And they're not wasting energy trying to force things that aren't ready to happen yet. Now there's one more aspect of Libra energy that I think is absolutely crucial to understand if you want to manifest more effectively. And that's their relationship with beauty and aesthetics. Because I think this is actually one of their most powerful manifestation tools, and it's something that gets completely overlooked. Libras are ruled by Venus, which means they have a natural affinity for beauty, for harmony, for things that are pleasing to the senses. And most people think this is just about vanity or superficially. But I think it's actually much deeper than that. I think Libras understand that beauty is a frequency. And when you surround yourself with beauty, when you create beauty in your environment, when you embody beauty in how you present yourself, you're actually raising your vibration. Think about how you feel when you walk into a beautiful space. Maybe it's a well-designed room or a stunning natural landscape or a piece of art that moves you. You feel different, right? You feel elevated. You feel more expansive. You feel more alive. That's not just an emotional response. That's a frequency shift. Beauty literally raises your vibration, and Libras know this. They know that when they invest in creating beauty around them, when they dress in ways that make them feel beautiful, when they curate their environment to be aesthetically pleasing, they're not just being vain. They're doing energetic work. They're raising their frequency. And when your frequency is higher, you attract higher frequency experiences, opportunities, and people. I've seen this play out in really tangible ways. Libras who invest in their appearance, who take time to create beautiful living spaces, who surround themselves with art and music and things that please their senses. They consistently attract better opportunities than people who neglect these things. And it's not because they're more superficial. It's because they understand that the external environment affects the internal state, and the internal state determines what you attract. So if you want to tap into Libra manifestation energy, start paying attention to beauty. Start investing in creating beauty in your life. And I don't mean you need to spend a lot of money. Beauty doesn't have to be expensive. It's about intentionality. It's about caring enough to make things pleasing. It's about honoring yourself enough to create an environment that feels good to be in. Maybe it's fresh flowers on your desk. Maybe it's lighting a candle when you work from home. Maybe it's wearing clothes that make you feel good even if nobody's going to see you. These small acts of creating beauty, they're not frivolous. They're frequency shifters. And when you shift your frequency, you shift what you attract. And here's something I find really fascinating about this. Libras don't just create beauty for themselves. They create it for others too. They're the ones who remember to bring a hostess gift. They're the ones who send thoughtful cards. They're the ones who notice when someone needs a compliment or a kind word. And this generosity with beauty, this willingness to create pleasant experiences for others, it actually amplifies their own manifestation power. Because here's what happens energetically when you give beauty to others. You're affirming to the universe that there's abundance. You're saying, I have so much that I can share it. I have so much beauty in my life that I can create it for others too. And the universe responds to that frequency of abundance by giving you more to share. It's a positive feedback loop. This is very different from the scarcity mindset that most people operate from. Most people hoard their resources, their time, their energy, their compliments, because they're afraid there's not enough. They're afraid that if they give too much away, they'll be left with nothing. But that fear of scarcity actually creates more scarcity. It broadcasts a frequency of lack, and the universe mirrors that back. Libras don't operate from scarcity. They operate from abundance. They give freely because they trust that there's more where that came from. They create beauty for others because they know that beauty multiplies when it's shared. And this generous, abundant approach to life is actually what keeps their manifestation pipeline flowing. Now I want to address something that I think is really important, because I know some of you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but I'm not a Libra. I don't have Venus ruling my chart. Does this mean I can't access this energy? Does this mean I'm at a disadvantage? And the answer is absolutely not. Here's the thing about astrology that I think gets misunderstood. Your sun sign is just one piece of your chart. Everyone has Venus somewhere in their chart. Everyone has Libra ruling some area of their life. And more importantly, these aren't fixed traits that you either have or you don't. These are frequencies that you can learn to embody. Think of it like learning a language. Some people might be native speakers of Libra energy because it's their sun sign or their rising sign, or they have a strong Venus placement. But that doesn't mean you can't become fluent in it too. You just have to practice. You have to consciously cultivate these qualities until they become second nature. And honestly, I think this is one of the most empowering things about understanding astrology. It's not about putting yourself in a box or limiting yourself based on your birth chart. It's about understanding the full spectrum of energies available to you and learning how to access them when you need them. So if you want to manifest like a Libra, if you want to tap into that magnetic attractive frequency, you can. You just have to be intentional about it. You have to practice embodying the qualities we've been talking about. The calm certainty, the energetic neutrality, the strategic receptivity, the appreciation for beauty, the generous abundance mindset. And here's what I've found in my own experience and in working with others. When you start consciously practicing these qualities, when you start embodying this frequency, things shift really quickly. You don't have to wait years to see results. You don't have to completely transform your personality. You just have to make small, consistent adjustments to how you're showing up energetically. Let me give you some really practical ways to start doing this right now. First, practice the pause. When you want something, instead of immediately jumping into action mode, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what frequency am I broadcasting right now? Am I coming from lack or abundance? Am I forcing or allowing? And then adjust accordingly. Second, create beauty in one small area of your life. It doesn't have to be your whole house or your whole wardrobe. Just pick one thing. Maybe it's your workspace. Maybe it's your morning routine. Maybe it's how you set the table for dinner. And make it beautiful. Make it pleasing. Notice how it makes you feel. Notice how it shifts your energy. Third, practice energetic neutrality with something small. Pick a desire that you have but that you're not super attached to. Maybe you want a parking spot or a free coffee or a compliment from a stranger. Something low stakes. And practice wanting it while being completely okay if it doesn't happen. Notice how that feels different from desperate wanting. Notice how things show up more easily when you're in that neutral state. Fourth, pay attention to the mirror. Start noticing how your external reality reflects your internal state. When something shows up in your life, ask yourself, what frequency was I broadcasting that attracted this? When something doesn't show up, ask yourself what internal contradiction might be blocking it. Get curious about the feedback the universe is giving you. And fifth, practice strategic receptivity. Start paying attention to when you're in flow and when you're forcing. When doors are opening easily, lean into that. When you're hitting resistance, pull back and reassess. Trust that the universe is guiding you toward your highest good and that sometimes the path there looks different than what you expected. These practices, they might seem simple, but I really believe that simple doesn't mean easy, and it definitely doesn't mean ineffective. These are the exact mechanisms that Libras use to manifest so effectively, and when you start using them too, you're going to see results. Now there's one final thing I want to talk about before we wrap up, and that's the shadow side of Libra energy. Because I think it's important to understand that every frequency has a high expression and a low expression. And if you're going to work with Libra energy, you need to be aware of both. The shadow side of Libra shows up as people-pleasing, as losing yourself in relationships, as being so concerned with harmony that you sacrifice your own needs. It shows up as indecision that becomes paralysis, as neutrality that becomes apathy, as receptivity that becomes passivity. And I think this is really important to understand, because when you're learning to embody a new frequency, there's always a risk of overcorrecting. You might go from being too forceful to being too passive. You might go from being too attached to being too detached. You might go from being too self-focused to being too other-focused. The key is balance, and this is actually very Libra. The symbol for Libra is the scales. It's about finding equilibrium. It's about being able to hold multiple truths at once. It's about being strong enough to be soft and soft enough to be strong.